The Silver Spur Saloon was the kind of place that smelled like whiskey, sweat, and wood smoke, all mixed together into something raw and familiar. It thrived on noise, raucous laughter, clinking glasses, and the constant shuffle of boots on worn wooden floors. Yet, when Victoria Hale began to sing, the chaos stilled. It wasn't just that she had a beautiful voice. It was something deeper, a way of commanding attention without raising it. The room bent to her will. For the few minutes her song lasted, Victoria had learned early that survival in towns like Red Creek required more than skill with a melody. It required instinct, the twitch of a jaw, a restless hand hovering over a gun, or a glance exchanged between men could tell her more than hours of questions ever would. Every evening she sang, she was not only entertaining, it was reconnaissance. It was insurance. It was set. Tonight was no different. As her final note lingered, long and smooth, applause erupted, echoing off the walls. Men cheered, women clapped, and the bartender wiped a hand across his sweat-streaked face. But Victoria's attention wasn't on the clamor. It was on a man near the back of the room, standing in the shadows. He wore a brown coat, dusted with the dust of the plains, a wide-brimmed hat pushed back, and a badge glinting under the lantern light. He didn't drink. He didn't laugh. He only watched, as if measuring the room and everyone in it. Tyron Cole. Victoria had heard of him, the lawman who didn't bend, didn't compromise, didn't fall for the charm of a smooth song or a pretty smile. Usually, a deputy like him would be brash, loud, demanding attention and obedience. But this man was different. He was quiet, calm, deliberate, and Victoria didn't know if she liked it or feared it. When she finally stepped down from the stage, the din of the saloon returned. She made her way to the bar, her long skirts swaying with practiced grace. The man followed. He leaned against the rail with casual ease, but his eyes never left her. "You sing like someone who listens," he said, voice low, carrying just enough authority to make heads turn. Victoria raised a brow. "And you watch, like someone who doesn't trust anyone." "Trust is earned," he replied, eyes scanning her carefully. "So is information," she said, a slight smirk playing on her lips. His gaze flicked toward the back, where a few shady men whispered to one another. "I'm looking for Elias Crow," he said. "I hear he uses places like this to move messages." Victoria's heart skipped. Crow, the man who had been slipping through Red Creek's fingers for months, leaving chaos in his wake. She had seen him before, smiled at him in passing, while pretending ignorance. Now, with Tyron's calm presence beside her, she realized there was no pretending. "I sing," she said carefully. "I don't keep records or follow men. I survive by keeping my head down." Tyron's gaze softened, just a fraction. "Then keep singing. But if you hear something, anything, come find me. We don't have much time." Before she could respond, he turned and left the saloon, boots clacking against the wooden floor. Victoria watched him go, feeling a strange mix of curiosity and caution. Her heart raced not from fear, but from something else, something unexpected. As the crowd returned to their drinks and cards, Victoria felt the weight of the night settle in. Somewhere in the smoky air, a new story had begun, one that involved danger, law, and a man who wasn't like the others. One that, she realized, with both excitement and apprehension, could change everything. For the first time in years, Victoria sang not just to survive. She sang knowing that her voice had drawn something far more dangerous than attention. It had drawn a lawman, perhaps something even riskier. A spark she wasn't prepared to deny. Victoria had never trusted lawmen. They were usually loud, heavy-handed, and quick to assume the worst of a woman who spent her nights singing for survival. Yet Tyron Cole was different. There was no swagger in his step, no arrogance in his voice. He was careful, quiet, and impossibly shy. Even so, Victoria didn't let her guard down. Not entirely. She had survived long enough to know that charm and honesty rarely came together in a man like him. The next evening, Tyron returned to the Silver Spur Saloon. He chose the same chair at the back of the room, ordered the same glass of water, and surveyed the crowd as though memorizing every detail. Victoria noticed him immediately, even before her first note. It was a strange feeling, someone watching, not for entertainment, not for admiration, but for something deeper. Something that demanded her attention in ways she wasn't used to. As she sang, Victoria found herself listening to the room in a different way. Names, murmured plans, subtle gestures, every detail became a clue. She had already spotted Elias Crow, the man Tyron had warned her about. He moved like a shadow through the crowd, quiet, calculating, always watching. He whispered to those around him in tones that suggested secrecy, yet careless enough for Victoria to catch. The more she noticed, the more dangerous it became. Later, backstage, Tyron approached her. His boots were silent against the floorboards, but the weight of his presence made her heart skip. Crow is planning something, he said, without preamble. He's going to hit the payroll shipment, passing through Dead Man's Pass. Victoria froze. That wasn't something she should know, yet somehow she did. She knew the route Crow preferred, the men he bribed, the whispers in the dark. But she was still just a singer. You shouldn't be involved, Tyron said, reading her hesitation. But you are. And if you help me, we might stop him before someone dies. Victoria studied his face, searching for deceit. There was none, only seriousness, and something else she didn't want to name trust. Against her instincts, she nodded. I'll help, she said carefully. But on my terms. Tyron's lips curved slightly. Fair enough. We do it your way, for now. From that night on, they became an uneasy partnership. Victoria continued to sing at the Silver Spur, but now her songs were more than entertainment. They were surveillance. She noticed which men lingered too long, who passed secret messages, who followed Crow's patterns. Tyron took her observations, pieced them together, and slowly formed a strategy. Despite the danger, a strange camaraderie developed between them. They spoke late into the night after the saloon closed, sharing fragments of their lives. Tyron told her of his father, killed by an outlaw when Tyron was just a boy, and of the vow he made to uphold the law no matter the cost. Victoria shared her own story of drifting from town to town, her voice her only weapon and her only means of survival. One night, as they walked together down a quiet, lantern-lit street, Victoria caught herself laughing at a small joke Tyron had made. The sound startled her. It had been so long since she had felt anything close to normal. Tyron's eyes softened, and for a moment, the weight of danger lifted between them. But danger was never far behind. Crow had noticed them working together, and Victoria sensed it in the way his eyes lingered too long, and his men moved with subtle threats. She knew it was only a matter of time before the confrontation came. Yet, in the midst of fear and uncertainty, Victoria felt something she had never allowed herself to feel: hope. Perhaps she wasn't just surviving anymore. Perhaps she could make a difference, and perhaps, if she was careful, she could even trust someone completely. Tyron watched her as she disappeared backstage that night, unaware of how much his thoughts had begun to revolve around her. In the dangerous game they were about to play, both of them knew one truth: survival would mean working together. And for the first time, both of them wondered if they could survive not only the outlaws around them, but the growing connection between their hearts. The sun had barely begun to rise when Victoria and Tyron rode out of Red Creek. The streets were quiet, the town still wrapped in early morning haze, but the tension in the air was anything but peaceful. Tyron's horse's hooves crunched over the dirt road as he kept his gaze steady on the horizon. Behind him, Victoria rode with practiced calm, though her heart raced. "You sure about this?" Tyron asked, his voice low, almost cautious. "It's dangerous. Crow isn't just a thief, he's reckless, and he's deadly." Victoria adjusted her grip on the reins, her long skirt brushing against the saddle. "I've been listening to him for weeks. I know what he's planning. If I stay behind, someone's going to get hurt, and I refuse to be a coward." Tyron studied her for a moment, searching for hesitation. He found none. Her jaw was set, her eyes sharp, and her hands steady. She was no ordinary singer. Maybe, he realized with a start, she was more dangerous than Crow himself because she was unpredictable and fearless. The trail to Dead Man's Pass was treacherous. The cliffs rose steep and jagged, shadows twisting in ways that could hide a man or a dozen. The wind howled through the canyons, carrying with it the scent of dust and danger. Tyron's hand never strayed far from his gun, and every sound made him flinch. But he maintained a mask of calm. Victoria rode beside him, alert and silent, absorbing the landscape like a hunter. Hours passed as they moved slowly, careful not to give away their position. Tyron's plan was simple: wait for Crow at the narrowest point of the pass, where escape would be impossible. Victoria's role was equally important. She was the eyes, the one who could spot Crow's men approaching from angles Tyron couldn't see. As the sun dipped low, painting the canyon in reds and oranges, the ambush came. Crow's men had been waiting, and the first gunshot cracked like thunder. Horses bolted, men shouted, and the canyon walls echoed with chaos. Tyron fired first, his aim true, but there were too many, and the deputy was knocked from his horse by a strong kick from one of Crow's men. Pain exploded across his shoulder and side, but he gritted his teeth, refusing to surrender. Victoria's heart pounded. She ducked behind a rock, revolver shaking in her hands, eyes fixed on Crow. He moved like a predator, confident and cruel, his laughter echoing as bullets flew past her. But she remembered Tyron's words: stay calm, wait for the right moment. When Crow raised his gun to finish Tyron, Victoria's training as a survivor took over. She took a deep breath, aimed carefully, and fired. The shot rang true. Crow stumbled, stunned. Then Tyron was back on his feet, racing forward with a roar. Another shot, another tumble, and suddenly the outlaw was on the ground, defeated, his gang scattering into the shadows. Silence fell like a heavy blanket. Tyron, bruised and bleeding, slumped against a rock. Victoria rushed to him, pressing her hands to his wounds. "You can't die on me," she whispered fiercely. "Not now, not ever." Tyron grimaced, pain etched into his features, but he smiled faintly. "I wasn't planning to." They stayed there a long moment, breathing hard, adrenaline fading, realizing that together they had survived something deadly. Crow was finally out of their lives, at least for now. And in the quiet aftermath, Victoria felt something shift. The danger had drawn them closer, forged trust and respect, and awakened feelings she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge before. As they mounted their horses and rode back toward Red Creek, the canyon seemed less threatening, almost protective. They had faced Crow together and survived. More than that, they had proven that their partnership, as uneasy as it had begun, could withstand anything. Victoria looked at Tyron as the wind whipped through her hair. "I don't usually do this," she admitted softly, "but I'm glad you were here." Tyron's gaze softened. "I'm glad you were too." And somewhere deep in the canyons of Dead Man's Pass, amidst dust, danger, and gunpowder, a bond began to form that neither of them could ignore. The return to Red Creek was quiet, almost surreal. The town itself seemed to exhale after the chaos of Dead Man's Pass. Life went on, the saloon filled with its usual noise. Horses clopped down the streets, and merchants called out their wares. But Victoria and Tyron both carried the weight of what had happened with them. Neither spoke much about it, but the unspoken bond between them had grown stronger than either wanted to admit. Victoria returned to the Silver Spur Saloon that night, standing once more on the stage. Her voice was as clear and commanding as ever, but something in her tone had shifted. There was confidence now, not just survival. A note of triumph beneath every lyric. The crowd cheered, but Victoria's eyes searched for one familiar face. Tyron stood at the back, leaning against the wall as he always did. His eyes were soft, his posture relaxed, and for the first time she noticed the small smile tugging at his lips whenever she glanced his way. After the show, she found him outside, leaning against his horse, as the sun dipped behind the hills. The warm colors of dusk painted the town in gold and red, and for a moment Victoria forgot about danger, about Crow, about every threat that had come and gone. "You could leave," Tyron said quietly, breaking the silence. His voice carried that calm authority she had come to trust, yet there was something tentative in it. "After everything, you don't have to stay. You could move on, find another town, another stage. It's your choice." Victoria studied him. She had spent her whole life running from towns, from men, from herself. Staying had never seemed safe, never seemed wise. Yet now, facing the man who had shared danger, fear, and moments of laughter with her, staying suddenly felt like the braver choice. "I've spent my life running," she admitted. Her voice was soft but firm. "Maybe it's time I stand still. Maybe it's time I build something worth holding on to." Tyron's eyes softened further. He reached for her hand, and for a moment the world seemed to pause. "I can't promise you safety," he said. "I can't promise that life here will ever be easy, but I can promise honesty, loyalty, and that I'll face whatever comes with you." Victoria felt her chest tighten. It was more than she had expected, more than she had ever allowed herself to hope for. Slowly, deliberately, she intertwined her fingers with his. "Honesty is enough," she said, letting a small, genuine smile spread across her face. They stood together under the fading light, the quiet of Red Creek surrounding them. Somewhere behind them, the silver spur continued to hum with life, yet it seemed smaller now, insignificant, compared to the moment between them. Tyron leaned closer, and Victoria felt the warmth of his presence, steady and reassuring. Then, in a moment that neither of them tried to rush, they kissed softly, deliberately, a promise of something neither fully understood, yet both were ready to explore. Afterward, they walked through the empty streets, talking quietly about nothing and everything about their dreams, their fears, and the uncertain future they were willing to face together. For the first time, Victoria realized that danger could coexist with trust, and that love could grow even in the harshest of landscapes. By the time they returned to the saloon, the stars were bright above Red Creek, scattered like diamonds across the sky. The town seemed to rest beneath them, silent and protective. Victoria and Tyron stopped, looking up at the expanse of night. For a moment, everything felt possible. Red Creek was not perfect. The past still lingered. The threat of outlaws and chaos still existed. But for Victoria and Tyron, the future looked brighter than either had dared to imagine. The Saloon Singer and the Lawman had survived danger together and had discovered something stronger than either bullets or bounty. The beginnings of love. As they parted for the night, Victoria realized that staying in one place, trusting someone, and letting her heart open might be the greatest risk she had ever taken, but also the one worth every heartbeat. Life in Red Creek had a new rhythm. The town still had its dusty streets and clattering hooves, its noisy saloons and endless gossip, but something had shifted. The threat of Elias Crow had passed, and with it the weight of constant fear. Yet, for Victoria Hale and Tyron Cole, life was far from ordinary. Their partnership had become a quiet, steady force, uniting a saloon singer's cunning with a lawman's vigilance and, beneath it all, a bond deeper than either had expected. Victoria had resumed her nightly performances at the Silver Spur Saloon, but the tone of her songs had changed. No longer were they solely about survival. Now there was hope in her melodies, laughter in her lyrics, and a warmth that drew the townsfolk closer than ever. She sang with a freedom she hadn't known she could have. Men still leaned forward, women still clapped, but everyone noticed a new spark in her presence, one that even Tyron couldn't ignore. Tyron, as always, watched from the back of the room. His badge caught the lantern light, but the tension that had once defined his posture was gone. He smiled softly at Victoria as she finished her final song. the notes lingering in the smoky air. He had no need to patrol the crowd tonight. No danger lurked, at least. Not yet. Instead, he was content to simply watch her, the woman who had saved more than his life. She had saved a part of himself he didn't realize he had lost. After the last notes faded, Victoria descended from the stage. The applause still lingered, but her focus was entirely on Tyron. She approached him, slipping her hand into his, as naturally as breathing. "Still watching like you're weighing evidence," she teased, her smile mischievous. Tyron chuckled, a sound she was growing increasingly fond of. "Just making sure nothing I care about gets into trouble." His eyes softened, lingering on her face. "And that includes you." They walked together down the empty street, the warm glow of lanterns painting long shadows along the dirt road. Red Creek seemed quieter now, as though it, too, respected the peace that had settled over the town. The wind rustled softly through the trees, carrying the faint sounds of distant cattle and a nightbird's call. For the first time in a long while, the world felt calm. Victoria leaned her head against Tyron's shoulder, feeling the strength and steadiness of his presence. "I never thought I'd feel safe here," she admitted softly. "But I think I've finally found a place I belong." Tyron's hand tightened around hers. "You do, and I'm not letting anything take it away from us." The town, with all its imperfections, seemed to embrace them, wrapping them in the comfort of small-town life. The saloon, the streets, the horses, the laughter, they all felt like parts of a story that Victoria and Tyron were now writing together. A story of courage, of survival, and finally, of love. As they reached the porch of the Silver Spur, Victoria looked up at the night sky, scattered with stars. Her voice, once a tool of survival, now hummed softly, in tune with the night. Tyron smiled, leaning close to her ear. "Looks like this story isn't ending anytime soon." Victoria smiled back, squeezing his hand. "No, I think it's only just beginning." And so, under the stars of Red Creek, the Saloon Singer and the Lawman stood together, stronger than fear, braver than danger, and more alive than ever before. Their partnership, forged in risk and tempered in trust, had blossomed into something neither could deny. A love that would endure beyond the dust, the gunfire, and the nights of uncertainty. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Western stories.